The polls closed about 15 minutes ago, and Republican Wyoming Representative Liz Cheney is very likely to lose today's primary election and end her three-term tenure as a Republican member of the House of Representatives. Wyoming Republican voters have completely turned on her, which of course is their prerogative. But I worry it's another illustration of all that's wrong with politics today, that it's about teams, not policy. The most recent poll from last week shows Cheney down by a whopping 29 points to her Trump-endorsed challenger, Harriet Hageman, which seems an insurmountable lead to overcome. Now, Cheney has gone from conservative darling to a pariah in Wyoming, based solely on her insistence that Donald Trump be held accountable for his role in January 6th. Her policy positions haven't changed. She's still a hard-nosed conservative who shares almost all of the same values of the party platform. She's pro-life, anti-big government, and against raising taxes. She's a proud defense hawk, just like her father, former Vice President Dick Cheney. But for most Wyoming Republican primary voters, this is a single-issue vote. And Cheney's opposition to former President Trump and her active role in the January 6th Commission was a bridge way too far. Cheney even turned to an unlikely group for support: Wyoming Democrats, encouraging them to switch parties and support her in tonight's primary. They can do that. And it's true that she has become something of a political celebrity among Democrats. But again, they too would just be picking teams, in that case the anti-Trump team, by voting for her rather than actually supporting someone based on a shared vision. There's even talk of a 2024 run for the White House. Now, I have no idea how these folks think she would get there. Neither Republicans nor Democrats would support her overwhelmingly in a primary. But hey, she makes a great story for a media that wants drama and conflict.
You are looking at somebody who would be able to make the case in 2024 that she quite literally took on the fight against Donald Trump. That's her.
She also has other political aspirations of her own, perhaps even a presidential run in 2024.
She may lose, but she wants to be in one place, and that's on a debate stage with Donald Trump in 2024.
You know, look, he says they may lose, but are they suggesting that after getting thumped in the Wyoming primary, she could be a player in a national GOP primary? She certainly can't run as a Democrat, because other than her position on January 6th and Trump, Democrats will absolutely hate her position on just about every other issue. Even if you think the January 6th Commission has been politicized, she has a conservative voting record up and down. But that now appears to be secondary. She would be far more palatable as a legislator to Republicans than Democrats, a perfect example of what happens these days in our political system when you don't have a base, a team. And so I have no idea how anyone thinks she could be a serious presidential contender. But joining me now is the editor-at-large at The Bulwark, Republican strategist and lifelong friend of Liz Cheney, Bill Kristol. Bill, thanks so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. So,
good to be with you, Dan.
I know the answer to this, but you have so much more experience and smarts in politics than do I that I'm still going to ask it, which is, how do we get to this place where conservative Liz Cheney looks like she's about to lose in a landslide to a newcomer?
Well, I think there's a general problem of partisanship and polarization in America, and lots of things contribute to that, and there are possible electoral reforms and other things that could help fix that. It's something you've been interested in and concerned about, and rightly so. But I do think we have a kind of unique phenomenon now where it's not about even the team you're on. It's not even about ideological polarization. It's not even about, what you're historically, are you a Republican or a Democrat? It's only about Donald Trump and loyalty to Donald Trump. And you cannot criticize Donald Trump. You cannot raise the issue of January 6th and be serious about getting to the truth. Liz Cheney will pay, probably tonight, is paying a high political price for insisting on the truth. I admire her for doing so. I don't know where her political career goes after that, but maybe you're right to be pretty skeptical that there's much for her in 2024. But things can change, and there are merits to running even if you don't win. Obviously, in raising important issues. Gene McCarthy ran in '67, '68 against LBJ. He didn't win. He didn't stop the Vietnam War, but he certainly changed the course of history in certain ways. So anyway, the Trump dominance of the Republican Party, Dan, is kind of unique, and that I think has created a situation where we're even beyond the normal team sports and just into kind of personal loyalty to one ex-president.
So if she were to run in 2024, your point is that she'd recognize she's not going to be able to win a Republican primary, right? That she would be doing it more to make a point, build out the Liz Cheney brand, whatever that case may be, but with no actual hope of winning, right?
Well, but I mean, Gene McCarthy helped, galvanize the Democratic Party to turn against the Vietnam War, and it ended up putting pressure on Nixon to end it when he might not otherwise have done so quickly. And so you could imagine a similar case where Liz Cheney really clarifies some of the issues of the rule of law of January 6th. She forces the other candidates, perhaps, the other Republican candidates, to be more serious about that and not just duck and dodge as they're now enjoying doing. They don't want to take on Trump. They don't quite want to defend him mostly, so they just kind of try to avoid discussing it. So I think she could play a pretty big role. I mean, it is kind of impressive. You may be right about your skepticism about the presidency, certainly in 24. But what other member of the House who's not Speaker, who's not the leader of the House, has had this kind of outsized impact, this outsized standing, really, in American politics, in American public discourse? She could really make a difference in various ways. It's a little hard to predict, but she's become such a major figure, partly because, and this is sort of your earlier point, it's so rare these days that someone stands up and says, I'm sorry, I'm going to do what's right. Yep. You elect me to try to do what's right, not simply to reflect your views at this moment. And I'm doing it pretty unapologetically.
It was sort of interesting. The Democrats, of course, have embraced Liz Cheney as this heroine, and yet when Roe versus Wade was overturned, she came out in support of the decision, and immediately Democrats were, what? Wait a sec. This is Liz Cheney? And it's like, have you not been paying attention to her positions? I mean, you suddenly think that she's this great sort of ally and friend of Democrats. And again, this is your point, which is on some issues, she may support them. She's very conservative and has one of the most conservative voting records in the entire Congress. And I guess that's the part that I think has largely been forgotten, is it doesn't seem to be based on her voting record.
But I got a text from a Democratic operative I know slightly who's worked on a million campaigns, actually, I'd say even on the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. And he said, I know you know Liz Cheney, and I'm rooting for her tonight. And, I disagree with her. I hope she loses on a lot of her policy views, but I really admire her. And it's important sometimes to support the person who's doing the right thing, or is putting country above party, or putting the Constitution above particular policy issues. Yep. And so I think you're being a little too harsh on the Democrats who like her. Some of them are just saying it, or they're just kind of forgetting certain stuff that they don't want to think too hard about. Maybe they wouldn't vote for her. I don't disagree with you on that in 2024. Maybe they shouldn't, incidentally, if they really disagree with her fundamentally. But she has tapped into a sense among Democrats and a few Republicans, probably not enough to win tonight, but that, you know what, it's good to see a politician do what he or she thinks is right. And you have to sort of admire that, and in a way, and praise it, even if you then don't agree with that person on a whole bunch of issues. Churchill was very admirable in the late 30s on the Nazis. He was out of touch. There were a lot of issues he was wrong on, or people at the time even thought he was wrong on, but they thought, you know what, on this very big issue, he's saying stuff that other people don't want to hear, and that it's important that it be said.
Look, I agree in a big way on the big picture here, which is we do need to support the iconoclasts and the people who are fighting against the extremism in parties, which is part of the reason that we did this segment today. It's just always interesting to me when talking about Liz Cheney, because her voting record is so solidly conservative that those on the left are going to say, well, wait a sec, she's not the moderate that you claim she is, et cetera. And the answer is sort of what you're saying, which is, hey, let's support people who take different positions on different issues and they vote with their conscience. Today, she's going to pay the price in Wyoming, but we shall see in the future. Bill Kristol, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.